let us study PSLV in all the details. UPSC जो भी पूछ सकता है PSLV के बारे में, let's look at it, let's understand it. तो सबसे पहले हम बोल रहे हैं PSLV is our third generation satellite launch vehicle or third generation rocket. Third generation rocket. When generation change occurs, technology में huge changes occur. So India's first generation rocket was SLV, then came ASLV, but now we don't use SLV and ASLV. Third generation rocket was PSLV. PSLV is something that we continue to use. So in our working rocket, PSLV exists and PSLV is our third generation rocket. Then GSLV Mark II will be our fourth generation rocket and GSLV Mark III is the fifth generation rocket. बात समझ में आ रही है? तो first of all, PSLV is what? PSLV is a rocket. PSLV is a satellite launch vehicle, which is third generation satellite launch vehicle. ये सबको समझ में आया? First aspect. Second, it was the first Indian rocket to be equipped with liquid stage. अब देखो, हमने अभी 4 stages of engine की बात करी है. Bigger engine, smaller engine, further smaller engine, further smaller engine. Now these engines may be using different kind of fuels as well. For example, PSLV rocket में first stage uses solid fuel, second stage uses liquid fuel, third stage again uses solid fuel, fourth stage uses liquid fuel. तो यहाँ पे liquid fuel use हो रहा है ना, second stage में, fourth stage में liquid fuel. अभी will come to why solid fuel, why liquid fuel. We'll come to that understanding also. We'll understand that too. But PSLV is the first rocket of India which used what? Which used liquid fuel. इससे पहले के जो rockets थे, दोनों SLV and ASLV, they used only solid fuels. We were talking about PSLV. PSLV is our third generation rocket. पहली बात. Second, PSLV is the first rocket that India started using where we had liquid stage. Liquid stage means our engine used liquid fuel. PSLV में first stage uses solid fuel, second stage uses liquid fuel, third stage uses solid fuel, fourth stage uses liquid fuel. Okay, now abhi tak we have 5 generation of rockets. I have briefly mentioned about these 5 generation. Why was PSLV developed? What was the purpose of PSLV? तो देखो PSLV का full form है Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. कल हमने एक polar orbit पढ़ा था, एक type of polar orbit. What was that? Sun synchronous polar orbit. Why do we launch satellite in sun synchronous polar orbit? So that angle that sunlight will make will remain same, so that we'll be able to take pictures which are in similar sunlight. So why are we taking pictures for Earth observation? So SSPO में what satellites are we launching primarily? Earth observation satellites. SSPO में sun synchronous polar orbit में what are we launching? Earth observation satellite. A polar satellite launch vehicle was primarily developed for launching satellites in SSPO. हम कौन से polar orbit के बारे में पढ़े? SSPO के बारे में पढ़े हो? तो polar satellite launch vehicle PSLV was primarily developed for launching satellite for Earth observation purposes. Launching satellite in SSPO. अब SSPO low Earth orbit में है या फिर geosynchronous orbit में है? Low Earth orbit में है, right? तो PSLV was developed for launching satellite in low Earth orbit. What satellite? Primarily sun synchronous polar orbit में primarily Earth observation satellites. But अब देखो PSLV, we can use PSLV for launching satellite in low Earth orbit. Okay, if I can carry X amount of weight to low Earth orbit, will I be able to launch satellite in geosynchronous orbit which is of slightly lesser weight? ऐसे समझो एक बड़ा पत्थर है, उसे you can throw for 10 meters distance. एक छोटा पत्थर will you be able to throw to a much longer distance? So while PSLV is capable of launching a satellite into low Earth orbit, heavier, but a little lesser weight, it will also be able to launch in geostationary or geosynchronous orbit. वो directly geosynchronous में ही जाता है, वो कहाँ जाता है? GTO में जाता है. Yesterday we studied about geostationary transfer orbit. तो PSLV was developed to allow India to launch its remote sensing satellite. Remote sensing satellites are Earth observation satellites in sun synchronous orbit. Before that, we used services of Russia for that. We did not use our own satellite for launching satellite in sun synchronous polar orbit, but it can also launch small size satellite into geostationary transfer orbit. Please remember, हम सीधा geosynchronous orbit में या geostationary transfer geostationary orbit में नहीं जाते हैं. What do we use? We use transfer orbit for that. Do you remember transfer orbit वाला phenomena? Funda? Yesterday we had studied that. Okay. So where will PSLV be launching satellite? PSLV can launch satellite into SSPO or low Earth orbit, or it can launch smaller satellites into geostationary transfer orbit. It will not launch, it will itself not go to geostationary orbit, but will launch satellite into geostationary transfer orbit. So in fact, if you'll come here, capabilities देखोगे तो sun synchronous polar orbit में it can launch a satellite weighing 1860 kg. एक satellite of weight of up to 1860 kg it can launch where? In sun synchronous polar orbit. But वही अगर इसे GTO में launch करने को बोला जाए तो GTO में it will not be able to carry 1860 kg of satellite. What will it do? It will be able to carry a smaller satellite into GTO, 1425 kg का satellite in GTO. Can we understand the rationale behind it? Can we understand the fundamental concept why this would be the case? Now, so we have understood this thing. Why was where is PSLV used, and we also understand that in low Earth orbit it can launch satellite weighing up to 1850 kg, and in GTO it can launch satellite weighing up to 1425 kg or 1450 kg, roughly ऐसे मान लेते हैं. Okay, now so far it was developed, PSLV was developed in 1990s and it has had by December 2024 जो latest launch हुआ है PSLV का, अभी कुछ दिन पहले ही हुआ है, I think 30th December या 28th December को हुआ है, जिसका SpaceX launch किया है जिसने. तो PSLV C60 was the 62nd launch of PSLV. तो so far there has been 62 launches of PSLV. So far there has been 62 launches of PSLV. Of them there has been only 2 failures, and that is why. तो इसका first launch 1993 में fail हुआ था, then again somewhere in 2017-18 one of the launches failed. Other than these 2 failures, 62 launches में PSLV has not seen any failure, and therefore it is one of the world's most reliable rockets. Got it? अच्छा, एक और चीज नोट करिए, देखो PSLV C60 is the 62nd launch of PSLV. PSLV C59 will be the 60th launch of PSLV. PSLV C58 will be the 59th launch of PSLV. तो बेसिकली जो नंबरिंग शुरू हुई उससे पहले 2 लॉन्चेस हो गए थे. Are we getting it? Sorry? 61st. I'm sorry. See, it will be 61st and it will be 60th. So before what started? Before numbering started, 2 launches had already taken place without C1, C2 वाला numbering. So PSLV C60 is 62nd launch of PSLV. So in 62 launches as of January 2024, January में कोई PSLV launch का plan नहीं है. So in 62 launches there have been only 2 failures of PSLV, and thus PSLV is one of the most reliable rockets in the world. Now capabilities we have understood. To SSPO, what can it carry? 1860 kg of weight, and to GTO, geostationary transfer orbit, it can carry 1425 kg of weight. अब it has 4 stages of engine. और भी features देख लेते हैं PSLV के. PSLV has 4-stage engine. We understand the reason for having multiple stages. We have clarity कि there are multiple stages. Why we have multiple stages? More high thrust, lower thrust, much lower thrust, एकदम ही कम thrust. We do not want to carry bigger engines for that. That's why PSLV has 4 stages. PSLV has 4 stages. Fine. Now PSLV engine is also expandable engine. PSLV को हम expandable engine बोलते हैं. देखो ये PSLV rocket का image है. Can you see PSLV rocket? इसके नीचे ना you will see some more rockets kind of thing have been added. These are known as strap-on motors. These are known as strap-on motors. PSLV में और motors add कर दो to increase its ability to generate thrust. If it will be able to generate more thrust, what would happen? It will be able to carry heavier satellites into orbit, है ना? तो इसीलिए हम बोलते हैं PSLV is a expandable system, और PSLV rocket is a expandable rocket. ऐसे ही हम GSLV में भी देखेंगे. GSLV is also a expandable rocket. Are we able to understand this? Okay. Now इस expansion capability को थोड़ा सा समझते हैं. देखो, if you only look at PSLV rocket, let's say this is the rocket. अभी यहाँ पे कोई strap-on motors नहीं डाला है, तो इसे हम we call it PSLV core alone. PSLV core alone. We'll see PSLV C60, which is the 62nd launch of PSLV, जिससे अभी SpaceX गया है. the launch which is the latest launch, it used the core alone version of PSLV. So when you are only using this rocket without any strap-on motors, what do you use? You use PSLV core alone. और PSLV core alone का capability कितना है पता है? Only 1100 kg into SSPO. आपने बोला सर, आपने तो बताया था PSLV can carry 1850 kg to SSPO. That is the best version of PSLV with all the strap-on motors and everything. But PSLV core alone का capability कितना है? Only 1100 kg. Then we have PSLV DL, दो strap-on motors. PSLV QL, 4 strap-on motors. 2 strap-on motors, 4 strap-on motors. PSLV G, it has 6 strap-on motors. तो इसके पास कितना था? 2, इसके पास 4, and this has 6 strap-on motors. So will its capability be higher? We do not have to remember capability of each of the rocket. That's not important. But will their capability be higher? And then we have PSLV XL. XL is 6 strap-on motors but extra large. जो motor strap-on कर रहे हो वो और बड़े हैं. PSLV XL. It will also have 6 strap-on motors but 6 extra large strap-on motors. तो हम बोलते हैं ना कि PSLV का capability is 1850 kg to SSPO. It is the capability of PSLV XL. It is the capability of PSLV XL. Are we comfortable here? We're able to understand this? So, coming back to this. Expansion of capabilities because of strap-on motors. इसमें we can have PSLV core alone, PSLV DL, PSLV QL, PSLV G and PSLV XL. PSLV XL जो 1800 kg के आसपास कैरी कर सकता है thanks to SSPO. PSLV core alone 1100 kg. Just remember these two numbers. This is good enough. तो PSLV का capability क्या है? Between 1100 kg and 1800 kg. That's its capability. Now it can carry a satellite weighing 500 kg too. Fine, but it will be underused because I have a bus where I can carry 11 people. You are sending for only 5 people. It will be underused. So PSLV core alone को ऐसे समझो 1100 kg or 11 people. Right? Are we understanding this? Now, so far we have some basic understanding of PSLV. PSLV is our rocket. We understand what rocket is. Rocket will take our satellite to the orbit. PSLV is third generation rocket of India. First generation में we had SLV, फिर we had ASLV, now we have PSLV. उसके बाद GSLV Mark II and GSLV Mark III, fourth and fifth generation. ये clear हुआ? Then PSLV is the first rocket of India which started using liquid fuel or which started using liquid engine. PSLV is an expandable system. By strap-on motors we can expand its capability. We have PSLV core alone and then we can have PSLV DL, QL, G and XL. Are we understanding this? Are we getting it? PSLV is the most reliable one of the most reliable rockets in the world. In 62 launches of PSLV, only 2 failures. एक तो पहला सबसे पहला वाला. The first failure is like considered part of development only. Development के time ही failure हुआ. And 1 failure in the last decade. Only 2 failures. PSLV has 4 stages main engine. First stage is solid, second is liquid, third is solid, fourth is liquid. तो solid engine मतलब solid fuel use कर रहा है. Liquid engine it is using liquid fuel. Solid engine solid fuel, liquid engine liquid fuel. We will understand ये solid liquid क्यों है, but this is the scenario. Now what is the key significant achievement? तो reliability, only 2 failures. Commercial use, it has launched satellites for foreign countries also. जैसे हम अभी PSLV C59 की बात करेंगे. It launched satellite for European Space Agency. प्रोबा करके एक सैटेलाइट लॉन्च किया उन्होंने यूरोपियन स्पेस एजेंसी के बारे में. तो ये तो इट्स आल्सो अर्निंग अस मनी. देन इट हैज प्लेड सिग्निफिकेंट रोल इन मोस्ट ऑफ द इंडियाज इंपॉर्टेंट लॉन्चेस. जैसे आप चंद्रयान 1 की बात करो तो बिफोर जीएसएलवी मार्क 3 केम, चंद्रयान 2 वाज यूजिंग जीएसएलवी मार्क 3. जीएसएलवी मार्क 3 अपना 5th जनरेशन सैटेलाइट है. बट जीएसएलवी मार्क 3 के आने से पहले सारे इंपॉर्टेंट सैटेलाइट्स इंडिया के, सारे इंपॉर्टेंट मिशंस इंडिया के किसने लॉन्च किए थे? पीएसएलवी ने. Chandrayaan-1 Mars orbiter mission, मार्स ऑर्बिटर मिशन में, जहां पे मॉम इज रिवॉल्विंग अराउंड, मंगलयान इज रिवॉल्विंग अराउंड मार्स, तो उसको ऑर्बिट में किसने लॉन्च किया? अर्थ के अराउंड ऑर्बिट में। फर्स्ट इट वाज लॉन्च्ड इन ऑर्बिट अराउंड अर्थ, हु लॉन्च्ड इट? पीएसएलवी। ऐसे ही अपना नाविक सिस्टम आईआरएनएसएस, जीपीएस के काउंटर पार्ट हम बना रहे हैं, नाविक आईआरएनएसएस, वेयर वाज इट लॉन्च्ड? हु लॉन्च्ड इट? पीएसएलवी लॉन्च्ड इट। तो most of the India's important missions before the coming of GSLV Mark III was carried by PSLV. Fine. Now, थोड़ा सा सॉलिड फ्यूल लिक्विड फ्यूल इंजन वाला कॉन्सेप्ट समझ लेते हैं। We said कि अपना जो PSLV है, it has 4 engines. तो if I draw my rocket like this, है ना, यहां पे कहीं पे मेरा सैटेलाइट पड़ा रहता है, and this is how rocket goes. This engine will be solid, then थोड़ा बड़ा बना देते हैं. This whole thing is, let's say stage 1. This whole thing is stage 1. It is using solid fuel. Then we have stage 2. Then we have stage 3, and then we have stage 4. This stage 4 along with satellite will start revolving, and in the process of revolution around Earth, this stage 4 will slowly release satellite. It will say, "जा सिमरन जा, जी ले अपनी जिंदगी." And Simran will keep revolving around Earth. Right? Up. Come to why solid, why liquid. What are the features of solid engine or solid fuel? What are the features of liquid engine, liquid fuel? देखो solid fuel का ना एक characteristic होता है. Solid, when you'll see in less volume, a lot of storage can happen. Solid की density ज्यादा होती है when compared to liquid, when compared to gas. So in less volume, a lot of mass can be stored in case of solid. So when you have to carry a lot of fuel, what do you prefer? Solid. In the situation where you have lot of fuel to be burned, what do you prefer? Solid. पहली चीज समझ में आई? जहां पे you'll need a lot of thrust, you'll need to burn a lot of fuel. In lesser mass, solid will be able to, you'll be able to store more solid. पहला point समझ में आया solid fuel का. Second is solid fuel burns at one go. You cannot stop the burning of solid fuel. जैसे in case of liquid fuel, through pipe supply and everything, you can switch off the pipe. But when you have solid fuel, it burns at one go, and thus control is not available. Whereas in the last stage of the satellite, you need to have control. Why? Think of this. I'm suppose this is Earth, and this is the last stage of the engine. Phone बजा लो तुम लोग, है ना? This is the last stage of the engine, which starts revolving in this orbit. In the process of revolution, it launches the satellite. In the process of revolution, it launches the satellite. ठीक है? Now it wants to. When it is revolving, is it using its fuel? No, it's not using its fuel. But suppose it wants to go to a upper orbit now. The rocket का fourth stage wants to go to upper orbit. Will it have to switch on the engine again? It will have to switch on the engine again. It will go to a upper orbit, and it will start revolving in this orbit. In the process, in this orbit, it may launch a satellite. One rocket can launch multiple satellites. So यहाँ पे what do you need? यहाँ पे you need maneuverability. You should be able to switch off the engine. You should be able to switch on the engine, which isn't the case with solid fuel, but is the case with liquid fuel. So generally you will see when thrust required is very large. GSLV Mark II, GSLV Mark III, PSLV. सबसे पहले stage पे thrust required will be very large. What will be the fuel? Solid fuel. Upper stages पे you need maneuverability. What would be the fuel? Liquid fuel. Okay, अभी हम आएंगे cryogenic fuel पे भी, हाइड्रोजन और उसकी बात करेंगे, उस पे आते हैं. But if I have to go into solid fuel, liquid fuel वाला फंडा, तो solid fuel can provide me higher thrust in lesser volume. One time burn is feature. You cannot, once you burn it, you will not be able to stop the burning, and produces a lot of smoke too. Solid fuel is generally more polluting in nature, we understand that. When it comes to liquid fuel, यहाँ पे you can control thrust, you have maneuverability, engine can be shut down and restarted, and are we getting it? Per kg of fuel, it can produce more energy. Liquid fuel can have higher energy density because it can be purer, but volume it will require is higher, and then it also has higher specific impulse. नाउ व्हाट इज स्पेसिफिक इंपल्स, थोड़ा इसको भी समझ लेते हैं। तो सॉलिड लिक्विड का ब्रॉड अंडरस्टैंडिंग समझ में आया। नाउ वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ स्पेसिफिक इंपल्स। नाउ टू अंडरस्टैंड स्पेसिफिक इंपल्स, फर्स्ट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड द सिचुएशन इन द लास्ट स्टेजेस। आप जब लास्ट वाले स्टेज में हो, you are very far away from earth, the force required for your movement is very less, right? But you have to stay there for longer period because you have to sometimes launch satellite here, then go to a upper orbit and so on, है ना? So what you need is, you need that you should be able to produce some force for a lot of time. You should be able to produce some limited amount of force for a lot of time. यहां पे क्या चाहिए होगा? At lower level, you will require a lot of force, but for shorter time. So a lot of force for a small time. When you will multiply this, the number may come out to be lesser. Similarly, small amount of force or small amount of thrust, but for a long time. यहाँ पे भी this number will come lower, but respectable amount of force for respectable amount of time will give you this number to be higher. So this is called impulse. What is impulse? Impulse is this term. Impulse is force into time. तो अब देखो force बहुत ज्यादा है but time बहुत कम है. Will impulse be high? No. Force बहुत ज्यादा है but time is very less. This number will not be very high. Similarly, if time is very large but force is very less, then also the situation isn't good. This number. So if you have respectable amount of force for respectable amount of time, then this number will be the best. Okay, so this is impulse. Now what is specific impulse? Impulse per unit weight of fuel. Impulse per kg of fuel can be called specific impulse. तो हम क्या बोल रहे हैं? Liquid fuel has better specific impulse. That is, liquid fuel will be able to provide you a particular amount of thrust for a long time, so that impulse is higher per kg of weight. Their impulse would be higher, and that is why at upper stages, what do we prefer? Liquid fuel. That's why we prefer liquid fuel there. Okay, now, but it has some disadvantage also. Liquid engine has some disadvantage also. What is the disadvantage? देखो liquid engine में अब when you want to control the supply of fuel, you will need this pipe system and everything. All this will increase the weight of the engine. Solid fuel, आपको solid fuel रखा है, उसमें आग लगा देनी है. There the control mechanism is not there. But in liquid fuel, internal combustion engine में कहीं पे भी जब आप petrol diesel use कर रहे हो, it's a complex thing. A lot of pipe and all these mechanisms are there. It makes the weight of the engine heavier. So this is one of the disadvantage. This engine is more complicated to build. Liquid engine is more complicated to build and it is heavier. And that's why we prefer a hybrid engine. Solid, liquid, and so on. That is why we have gone for hybrid engine. Okay, so I hope now we understand everything about PSLV rocket. अगर एक क्वेश्चन बेसिक्स पे आता है, अभी नाउ विल कम टू करंट अफेयर्स. नाउ यू विल सी, यहाँ 30 दिसंबर को एक लॉन्च हुआ है, उससे पहले दिसंबर में कुछ लॉन्च हुआ है. विल कम टू दोस करंट अफेयर्स, बट फॉर नाउ इफ दे आस्क यू एनीथिंग अबाउट PSLV रॉकेट, यू विल ऑल हैव कंप्लीट clarity about PSLV rocket.